στον επόμενο, στον κύριο Σταφυλάκη, συγγνώμη, συγγνώμη, έχουμε τον κύριο Χουρμουζιάδη, με συγχωρείς. Βασίλη.
Ναι.
Εδώ είμαστε. Ο κύριος Χουρμουζιάδης είναι της εταιρείας Επικάρδιο που εδρεύει στην Αγγλία και όπως είπατε και στην προηγούμενη παρουσίαση ασχολείται πάρα πολύ με την εκπαίδευση των γιατρών από το ηλεκτροκαρδιογράφημα μέχρι τις σύμπλοκες επεμβάσεις ηλεκτροφυσιολογίας. Και στα επόμενα 10 λεπτά θα μας πει ο κύριος Χουρμουζιάδης λίγο τη δική του εφαρμογή.
Ευχαριστώ, Βασίλη και Κωνσταντίνε. Λοιπόν, βλέπετε την οθόνη μου. Υποθέτω ότι βλέπετε την οθόνη μου. OK, right. Θα κάνω πολύ γρήγορα. Είχαμε κάνει την εισαγωγή στις 12 η ώρα το μεσημέρι και τώρα θα ήθελα απλώς να περάσω στα γρήγορα την εφαρμογή αυτή που χρησιμοποιούμε. Καταρχήν βλέπουμε σε 3 διαστάσεις την ανατομία και μπορούμε να ξεχωρίσουμε ποια κομμάτια της ανατομίας θέλουμε να δούμε. Βλέπουμε, ας πούμε, τους πνεύμονες, από εδώ βγάζουμε το skin, το torso, το rib cage, etc. And so at any moment, at any step in the application, we can display specific parts of the anatomy. I'll leave it there. Then we enter the electrophysiology simulation. Now, why do we call it simulation? Here we have, imagine we have a population of cell nodes distributed around the 3D model of the heart. And the cell nodes behave like actual cells with activation, action potential activation profiles. We start with activating the SA node. I will pause here and scroll the simulation. Just one sec. Pause and scroll at the beginning of the P wave. Here you see activation around the SA node. So we have electrical activation on these specialized cells, the sinoatrial node cells, which then transmit the activation to the neighbors. And as that happens, we see an activation throughout the surface of the heart. Here we see all the activation on the atria. Let's see this in cross-section. And as you approach here, we see concentration on the AV node. That's the AV delay here. And then spread through the conduction pathways left and right into the ventricles. We can also show the ventricles in cross-section here. If it's going too fast, we can slow down the simulation. So this is controlling the speed of the simulation, not the heart rate. This is just going fast and forward. Now, the fact that it is a simulation, it means that when we pause, we cannot go forward because this is not a playback of a pre-recorded session. It's just only a simulation, so we can only see up to that point that it has simulated. Now, with this tool here, we can see the electrodes on the torso. Now, that's where it becomes interesting. We actually record this ECG live from this virtual heart. We can select any of the ECG signals here. Let's go to lead 1. Looking at lead 1, we see activation from right to left and having a predominant movement from right to left in the heart, we see a positive spike on the QRS, on the positive R wave. If we can actually move these electrodes, let's say I try to reverse them, put them left to right, or the left to right and right to left. So now we see a negative spike on the QRS. So this ECG is recorded live as we speak. So that's why we mean it is a simulation. It's not a playback. It's not a movie we're watching. We can reset the electrodes here. In the same way, we can look at all the 12 leads. Let's go to the chest leads. Now here, Again, this is very interesting for the novice, for the learner, medical school year 1, to understand what each of the 12 leads represent. There's a lot of schematics and drawings in books and a lot of descriptions that people can follow, but this is the best way to really understand why each lead looks like this on the ECG representation. And then we can pick any of these again, put them elsewhere, and you will get a different reading. When we do this, we can also look at the 12 lead at the same time. So we always have the 3D view and the 12 lead ECG all in our screen. We can pause and use the calipers, and that's very useful for the novice students to measure, or we can look at the ECG paper, which is a very common thing. They have to be able to read the ECG and measure on the paper. Let's go back to the normal now. Let's try something else now very quickly. I'm just going to jump to this pacing device, the temporary pacer we have here. This starts, as soon as it starts, let's go back to normal lead 2, and we're in normal heart. And my pacer provides 100 paces per minute. And we can see here the VP, the ventricular pacing, because the wire tip is in the right ventricle. I can pick the tip of the wire and put it anywhere. Let's put it somewhere inside. When it's blue, it means it's not capturing. If it goes orange, it means it's capturing. So I have to put it somewhere on the atrium, for example. Let's put it on the left atrium. So I'm pacing near the auricle of the left atrium. So you see now I'm getting AP, and the whole thing has changed. If I slow it down, here, you see the activation exactly from the tip. Of course, the pacing stimulus will interact with the natural rhythm of the heart in this case. Now let's do another interesting thing. Put the wire back into near the apex. And we have another set of parameters which are very useful for the novice students, and they really like playing with them. This one can allow us to, first of all, switch off the SA node. Let's switch off the pacer as well at the moment, and switch off the SA node. Now what we have is automatically we get some rate from the AV node. The AV node here automatically switches on, and it fires at 48 beats per minute, which we can change, of course, here. Now, if we switch off the AV node as well, what we get is, of course, complete asystole. Nothing. Now let's switch on the pacer. Now we're getting a pacing signal at 100 beats per minute from the apex. Now we see that this does not advance into the atria because we have to switch on our retrograde. So you have to switch on our AV node and retrograde. Now we see here that the signal we get from the apex advances into the AV node and then spreads into the atria. You can see this in cross-section again, very clearly here. You see it reaches the top of the bundle of His, the AV node, and it goes straight into the atria. So with this too, with this set of parameters and the pacemaker, we can introduce a lot of concepts in the electrophysiology of the heart. Using all these parameters and the functionality of the pace and sense of the pacemaker, we can actually show how the heart works in terms of electrics. And this becomes a very powerful interactive tool for the novice students to play and experiment and explore, so to speak. Of course, they're not going to be left on their own devices. They will follow tutorials. These are the interactive step-by-step tutorials, which introduce the subjects and go into like introduction to the heart, normal rhythm, cardiac axis, then going into pathologies, by groups, conduction abnormalities, AV blocks, atrial arrhythmias, etc. And then we're going into the pacing tutorials. Let's go to a more advanced multi-point pacing tutorial where it will show us the quadripolar pacing with a St. Jude Medical Abbott device. So this will go very advanced into how to program the specific pacemaker. So it starts simple and advances to quite high. Let's go now to the cardiac EP section, which is under development. Let's go back and cardiac EP here. Now, with this set of tools, first of all, we can show complex pathologies. Sorry about this. Yeah, let's pick a pathology here, like, for example, second-degree AV block. We will see here how our PR interval will increase, and then we will have a missed QRS. So that's a 3/2 AV block. Now, we can add a second pathology, like left bundle branch block. Now, I'm going to have a complex pathology, second-degree AV block and left bundle branch. Again, I see my PR interval is increasing, and I miss a QRS. And at the same time, I have left bundle branch, look here. You see the branch, oh, the left here is blocked. If I scroll back, I see my activation here on the right conduction pathway only. And at the same time, I can look at the 12-lead ECG of this complex pathology. Now imagine we can combine any of these list of pathologies. Of course, some of them will work better. Some combinations will work better, some not. It's a matter of simulation, I guess. But we can try them, and we can, I mean, we make sure that we can combine any with any, but there are some restrictions somewhere. Now, having a complex pathology makes it even more, this is not just cardiac EP, this applies to all ECG, because a lot of patients will have complex pathologies. And as far as we know, there's no way of actually seeing the complex pathology in a level like this, like 3D and simulated ECG. So this is a very good tool to explore complicated cases. And if we do have a complex case to diagnose, this becomes a good tool to test hypotheses and try to find a more accurate diagnosis. Now, a bit further, let's go now back to normal, still in cardiac EP. We can introduce some default intracardiac catheters, and we can record EGMs. So these are the electrograms from the HRA, the green one. Let's look at the cross-section again. So the green one is the HRA on the right atrium. The yellow is the bundle of His. The red is the right ventricle apex, and we have 3 on the coronary sinus. These are going to be updated now with more signals. We're going to have 5 on the CS and some more. And the catheters will be replaced by specific devices like the PolarX catheter from Boston Scientific, and we're looking at the Biosense Webster Carto system simulation, etc. So this will be customized into giving much more closer and close to cardiac EP tool training. This at the moment is very general. But yeah, parenthesis, once we do that, this is all normal, then we can select a pathology. Let's go to atrial fibrillation, for example. And now we'll see the fibrillation and how that is recorded on the EGMs. The new thing, just closing, the new thing we've done now recently is that all tutorials, if we go back to the basics and the pathologies and the pacing tutorials, they all include a multiple choice test at the end. Sorry, I'm just going a bit too far here. Go to tutorials. Let's go to Atrial flutter. At the end of the tutorial, I'm just going to go very quickly. I have 3 questions, multiple choice answers. And when I fill them in, I get a score. And the educator can see, the tutor can see the results of each student. We also have a quiz, which can be set by the tutor in the classroom. We can have tutor set quiz, like a question and a pathology, and then each student receives this, and they can make their diagnosis, and they can submit the answer directly back to the teacher. This can be used in classroom, but also can be used remotely from distance and offline if need be. So I went very quickly through the major features of the software. I'd like to answer questions, if any.
Amazing. Amazing work. Thank you very much. Κάποια ερώτηση? Βασίλη, κάθε πότε γίνεται ανανέωση του software?
On average, συνήθως έχουμε ένα καινούριο upgrade κάθε μήνα. Προσπαθούμε, κάθε μήνα. Προσθέτουμε καινούριο υλικό, διορθώνουμε bugs ή μικρά features. Επίσης, έχουμε ένα πολύ ωραίο feedback here, the feedback button, where every tutor or student can send us a direct message from here. And then by the end of the month, we have collected enough feedback, which then filters down into a new version. Αλλά αν μιλάτε για κυρίως major upgrades, it takes about 3 months to have a serious kind of upgrade. Τώρα κοιτάμε για αυτά που είπαμε για το Cardiac EP, που θα έχουμε καινούριο υλικό σε συνεργασία με την Biosense Webster. Θα είναι έτοιμα τον Νοέμβριο αυτά.
Τέλεια, τέλεια. Σε ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Βασίλη. Και επίσης να τονίσουμε άλλη μια φορά, ο κύριος Χουρμουζιάδης είχε την καλοσύνη να δώσει το software τόσο μέσω της Ελληνικής Καρδιολογικής Εταιρείας, όσο μέσω του απαιτή που έχουν πάρει κάποιοι φοιτητές μας και βεβαίως στους συμμετέχοντες εδώ πέρα που σας δίνει την δυνατότητα να το χρησιμοποιήσετε για μια χρονική περίοδο. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Βασίλη, και τα ξαναλέμε πολύ σύντομα.
Ευχαριστώ εγώ και καλησπέρα και καλό Σαββατοκύριακο. Καλή Κυριακή μάλλον, το Σαββατό έφυγε.
Please, thank you.